Ladies and gentlemen, steady yourselves, because what just unfolded between Trump and Prime Minister Modi isn't politics as usual. It's a geopolitical lightning strike, a shockwave, one of those rare moments where the entire world pauses and asks, wait, did Modi actually just say that? Trump tossed a verbal grenade toward India, and instead of dodging, Modi caught it, intensified the spark, and launched it right back across the ocean with surgical accuracy. And believe me, the fallout is something Americans never expected to witness. Because here's the reality. Modi didn't merely respond. He retaliated. He reshaped the conversation. He inverted the entire power dynamic. Trump's comments were loud, provocative, characteristic of a man who believes he can overpower any world figure by sheer personality force. But Modi answered with a cold, controlled sting. No chaos, no emotional eruption, pure calculation. He reminded the world that India is no longer a nation to be lectured, cornered, or pushed aside. It's a global force economically, militarily, diplomatically, and it expects respect. And in a single piercing moment, he exposed the inconsistency in Trump's statements, the wobbling diplomacy, the off-the-cuff bluster. Modi's message was unmistakable. If you speak about India, speak with precision, speak with respect, or don't speak at all. Americans watching this exchange were stunned. Not because Trump was loud, but because Modi was louder without ever raising his voice. A controlled burn, a strategic strike. And for once, Trump wasn't setting the tempo. He was on the receiving end. Trump delivers a blunt, controversial remark aimed at Modi and India. And to grasp its significance, you must understand how it disrupts the usual rhythm of international exchanges. Trump is known for speaking in a way that is raw, unfiltered, and often crafted to seize the narrative. When he directs that style toward a global leader, especially one like Modi, who represents a nation of over 1 billion people and a rapidly ascending world power, it lands with an impact that reverberates far beyond casual political commentary. Trump's remark wasn't simply criticism. It carried that familiar mix of provocation and theatricality, the kind designed to attract headlines and assert dominance. He painted India in a manner that implied weakness, inconsistency, or failure, and attempted to position Modi as someone who should justify or explain himself. That's where the comment hit hardest, because it tried to push India into a defensive posture on the global platform. In US politics, this sort of direct, almost dramatic attack is commonplace. But when aimed internationally, particularly at a figure like Modi, it turns into something far more volatile. It signals disrespect, challenges authority, and tests diplomatic boundaries. It leaves allies uneasy and adversaries intrigued. The comment immediately gained controversy because it carried layers suggesting that Modi was failing to meet expectations, that India wasn't contributing enough, or that previous praise had now shifted to criticism based on Trump's mood at that particular moment. This unpredictability is part of Trump's global persona, but it's also why the statement traveled rapidly through media outlets and diplomatic circles. People questioned whether it was a strategic tactic, a spontaneous jab, or an attempt to pressure India on trade, defense, or cooperation. Whatever the intention, it wasn't subtle, it wasn't courteous, and it certainly wasn't forgotten. Modi responds sharply, refusing to be cornered, diminished, or disrespected. And this moment becomes pivotal because it breaks the traditional expectation of how leaders typically deal with Trump's provocations. Instead of softening the blow, steering the conversation elsewhere, or taking the diplomatic high road to avoid confrontation, Modi selected clarity and firmness. His reaction was measured yet unmistakably forceful, formed in a manner that didn't escalate tensions, but made it absolutely clear that India would not accept being spoken about in dismissive or inaccurate ways. Modi's leadership style often relies on composed authority, and in this instance, he wielded it like a weapon rather than a shield. He didn't match Trump's volume or theatrics. He countered with precision, grounding his response in facts, national pride, and a steady tone that conveyed power without appearing emotional. His reply carried an underlying message. India is no longer a country that absorbs criticism quietly just to maintain smooth diplomatic relations. The era of being treated as a secondary power is over, and Modi emphasized that point without ever raising his voice. What made the response even more compelling was that Modi didn't personalize the issue. He reframed Trump's remark as a misinterpretation or misrepresentation of India's reality, essentially turning the critique back onto the man who issued it. This approach made Trump's statement appear less like a legitimate observation and more like an uninformed, impulsive jab. Modi's composed firmness projected confidence not only internationally but also domestically, strengthening the image of a leader who stands his ground and defends national dignity. Across the world, the message was unmistakable. India is now an equal force in global politics, not a nation that can be dictated to, scolded, or pressured. Modi drew a line that India would not allow to be crossed, and he did it without hostility. By speaking directly and standing firm, he seized control of the narrative and prevented Trump's remark from shaping the discourse. It was a reminder that respect must be mutual and that India now possesses the stature to insist upon it. The tone shifts from diplomacy to assertive counterpunch when Modi decides Trump's comment cannot be met with the polished, neutral language that leaders often rely upon to preserve courteous international relations. Diplomacy is built on careful wording, gentle correction, and avoidance of open conflict. But there are moments when maintaining that script sends the wrong signal. For Modi, this was one such moment. He understood that responding with routine diplomatic softness would imply weakness, acceptance, or even quiet agreement. So he chose a different route, allowing firmness to replace politeness, clarity to replace ambiguity, and strength to override restraint. The shift isn't dramatic or loud, but it is unmistakable. The way Modi shapes his sentences, the certainty in his posture, and the precision of his statements signal that he's not responding as a cautious diplomat, but as a leader representing a nation unwilling to be pushed around. When a leader steps out of the typical diplomatic mold, political analysts and allies immediately take notice because the entire tone of the conversation changes. Suddenly, it's not a polite exchange between leaders, it's a collision of authority. A recalibration of status, a moment where one side refuses to allow the other to dominate the narrative. Modi's assertiveness doesn't manifest in anger. Instead, it emerges in the way he highlights India's achievements, its global position, and its right to be discussed with accuracy. It appears in how he dismantles Trump's remark, not with emotion but with strategic, controlled pushback. This type of reply forces observers to reassess the power dynamic. It signals to the world that India demands respect and will not stay silent when its dignity is challenged. It also sends Trump a message that rhetorical dominance will not go unchallenged. The transformation of tone is what shocks observers. People expect Trump's bluntness, but they rarely see leaders reflect that energy with their own form of strength. Modi's shift represents a moment where diplomacy steps aside and national pride steps forward, firm and unapologetic. Modi emphasizes India's global rise and strategic value, and this becomes the heart of why his response resonates so powerfully. When a leader chooses to counter criticism by elevating the stature of their nation rather than defending themselves personally, the message automatically carries greater weight. Modi understands that modern India is not the India of past decades. It is one of the fastest-growing economies, a technological powerhouse, a major defense partner, and a nation with rising influence in global institutions. Instead of letting Trump's remark portray India as weak or underperforming, Modi shifts the conversation toward India's undeniable momentum. He highlights India's economic acceleration, its booming digital ecosystem, and its essential role in global supply chains. By doing so, he doesn't just counter Trump's remarks. He reframes India as a nation every global leader must take seriously, regardless of personal opinions. This strategy signals that India is no longer seeking approval. It is asserting its presence. Modi also subtly underscores India's strategic importance in geopolitics. especially at a time when global alliances, trade networks, and power structures are rapidly evolving. He understands that the United States requires strong, reliable partners in Asia, and India's stability, population strength, and expanding economic power make it absolutely essential. Emphasizing these truths transforms Trump's jab into an opening to highlight India's growing influence. This strategy operates on several layers. Within the country, it reassures people that their nation is respected, valued, and increasingly central on the world stage. Beyond its borders, it signals to other governments that underestimating India is not only incorrect but strategically unwise, and for Trump himself, it serves as a reminder that India cannot be fitted into simplistic narratives or reduced to a throwaway line designed for political drama. By rooting his reply in India's global progress, Modi effectively reverses the entire narrative. He turns what could have been a defensive moment into a powerful assertion of India's rightful place in international affairs. This shift in framing reinforces that India is not only rising but expects the world to acknowledge and honor that rise without reluctance. Before breaking down exactly what Modi stated and why his words are causing ripples across Washington, stay with me, because this is far more than an exchange between two leaders. It's a story about the changing shape of global power and who is genuinely influencing the direction of world politics. He exposes the inconsistency and frequent unpredictability of Trump's statements, and this becomes a pivotal moment in the entire interaction because it quietly moves the focus away from India and back onto the reliability of the person making the comment. Modi doesn't need to attack Trump openly or question his intentions. Instead, he simply highlights a pattern the world has observed for years: Trump's habit of shifting between praise and criticism depending on timing, audience, or personal temperament. By drawing attention to this inconsistency, Modi transforms the situation from a critique aimed at India into a critique of the remark itself. It illustrates that Trump's words are not grounded in stable policy, steady evaluation, or long-term thinking, but often in spur-of-the-moment reactions and theatrical delivery. This method is effective because it reminds global audiences that not every loud statement carries real weight. Modi's calm exposure of this volatility dilutes the impact of Trump's initial remark without raising tension or sounding provoked. He positions Trump's criticism as unreliable, suggesting that a comment made today could easily be reversed tomorrow and therefore shouldn't be treated as a serious evaluation of India or its leadership. This approach also reframes the message for Americans, many of whom already recognize Trump's unpredictable speaking style. When Modi points this out, he isn't revealing anything new to them. Instead, he is confirming a reality they have witnessed repeatedly. International analysts view this as a calculated move because it lifts Modi's image as the steady, composed statesman, while depicting Trump as the unpredictable figure. It sends a quiet signal to the world that India operates on consistency, strategy, and long-term vision, whereas Trump's remarks often function as momentary flashpoints rather than informed positions. It subtly pressures Trump as well, implying that if he wants his words to be taken seriously, they must be grounded in coherence rather than spontaneous theatrics. By emphasizing Trump's unpredictability, Modi strengthens India's position and firmly asserts that respect must rest on facts, consistency, and strategic substance, not shifting rhetoric. He redirects the narrative by placing India in a position of resolve and self-assurance. And this is where the entire dynamic changes. Instead of allowing Trump's statement to define the tone of the conversation, Modi skillfully takes command of the storyline. He does this not through emotional retaliation, but by spotlighting India's strengths, achievements, and strategic relevance. This move turns a potentially defensive exchange into a declaration of national confidence. By underscoring India's accomplishments in governance, digital infrastructure, economic expansion, technological leadership, defense collaborations, and space missions, Modi ensures that the discussion revolves around India's progress rather than Trump's critique. This reframing works because it denies Trump the position of superior authority. Traditionally, When a globally influential figure criticizes another nation, the assumption is that the targeted country must justify or clarify itself. Modi dismisses that outdated script entirely. Instead of responding as though India owes anyone an explanation, he speaks as a leader whose nation stands on equal footing. He highlights India's expanding global weight and makes it clear that India is not merely participating in world affairs, but actively shaping them. This transforms the entire perception of power. Trump's remark no longer appears as a judgment from a higher pedestal. It becomes a passing comment directed toward a rising, confident nation that demands respect. By controlling the narrative so effectively, Modi reassures audiences both at home and abroad. To Indians, he shows that their nation's global stature is secure and commanding respect. To other world leaders, he signals that India will not allow itself to be treated as a junior partner or a passive actor. To Americans observing the exchange, especially those familiar with past diplomatic interactions, he demonstrates that the global balance of power is shifting and that India is no longer the quiet, compliant partner of earlier decades. This reframing also places subtle pressure on Trump himself. When Modi speaks assertively about India's place in global strategy, it forces Trump's remark to seem out of context, poorly informed, and disconnected from modern geopolitical realities. It implies that anyone discussing India must recognize its rising influence or risk sounding outdated and uninformed. By doing so, Modi effortlessly turns the tables, transforming criticism into an opportunity to emphasize India's growing strength. Many Americans are left surprised because Modi's reply is unusually direct and unwavering, and this reaction arises from a mix of expectation, contrast, and global context. Over the years, Americans, across political media, public commentary, and diplomatic circles, have grown accustomed to world leaders responding to Trump with caution, measured language, or overly diplomatic phrasing. They often choose every word carefully to avoid provoking him, aware that Trump can escalate disagreements quickly and without warning. So, when Modi delivers a response that isn't wrapped in soft, diplomatic cushioning, it completely breaks the pattern Americans are used to seeing. They are not accustomed to leaders pushing back with such clarity, precision, and strength while remaining entirely composed. What astonishes them even more is the nature of the strength Modi displays. It is not loud, confrontational, or aggressive. Instead, it is calculated, disciplined, and grounded in national confidence rather than personal irritation. Americans recognize Trump's familiar style, using forceful language, dramatic phrasing, and sudden shifts to dominate discussions. But here, Modi counters with a different form of authority, one that doesn't mirror Trump's energy but rises above it. This sharp contrast catches American audiences off guard. They see a leader who remains unshaken, who refuses to be intimidated, and who does not attempt to soften his stance to avoid conflict. Modi stands firm and speaks with the weight of a nation that views itself as an equal, not a subordinate. Another reason Americans react so strongly is that Modi's reply underscores India's global rise more clearly than many recent diplomatic moments. Numerous Americans still view international politics through an older framework where the United States is undoubtedly dominant and other nations react cautiously to its leaders. Modi's assertiveness shows that the world has changed significantly, that India is now a major global force, and that US leaders cannot speak casually about it without receiving a bold, confident reply. The shock also emerges from realizing that Trump's usual rhetorical tactics don't work on every leader. Watching someone push back with composure, without engaging in showmanship, gives Americans a glimpse of a shifting global power structure. Modi's reply becomes memorable, not only because it is strong, but because it illustrates who truly sets the tone in international dialogue and who commands respect in modern geopolitics. Modi's countermove reshapes the power equation between India and the United States. And this moment is vital because it marks a transformation in how global relations are perceived and conducted. Historically, interactions between the US and other rising nations have been influenced by America's significant economic, military, and diplomatic strength. Statements from American leaders have often set the direction, with other countries responding cautiously to preserve diplomatic harmony. Modi's response breaks that long-standing pattern entirely. By addressing Trump's remark with firm confidence and a strategically crafted reply, Modi declares that India is no longer a passive participant in these exchanges. Instead, India is an independent force, capable of guiding the conversation, establishing boundaries and demanding respect on its own terms. This counter-response changes the narrative of authority and symbolizes a new era in which India stands as a powerful equal, rather than a subordinate voice. Modi doesn't simply defend India, he shifts the entire narrative. Instead of responding in a defensive manner, he redirects the conversation toward India's accomplishments, its strategic relevance, and its rapidly expanding influence on the world stage. This subtle yet impactful redirection shows that India now carries leverage, authority, and credibility that must be acknowledged. For the United States, and particularly for Americans watching this interaction, it becomes an eye-opening moment. It confronts the long-held belief that America automatically sets the direction, tone, and conclusion of major international conversations. Modi's style makes it clear that India cannot be brushed aside, underestimated, or lectured casually. It demands engagement that is balanced, respectful, and on equal terms. The effect of this countermove stretches far beyond a single exchange. It sends a wider message to other global leaders, partners, and rivals that India's emergence is real, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Its policies carry intention, and its leadership stands firm with assertiveness. It recalibrates diplomatic expectations by proving that confidence, national dignity, and strategic clarity can operate alongside thoughtful reasoning and sophisticated statesmanship. Modi's actions signal that the global landscape is transforming, with India positioning itself as a key figure that negotiates, influences, and sets terms when required. In the end, this countermove accomplishes something much greater than simply responding to Trump. It rebalances the scale of respect, authority, and diplomatic influence between the two countries. Modi demonstrates that India is no longer only reacting to American narratives or absorbing them without challenge. It is capable of creating its own narrative, earning attention, and asserting its stance in a manner that reshapes how the world views international relationships and modern geopolitical power. This moment essentially rewrites the perception of how dialogue between major nations unfolds, highlighting a new era where India is neither passive nor secondary, but proactive, respected, and strategically influential. What this exchange ultimately reveals is that the conversation between Modi and Trump is far more than a verbal disagreement. It becomes a defining turning point, one that transforms how power, respect, and national assertiveness are interpreted on the global platform. Modi's reply was sharp, measured, and strategically crafted, turning what could have been a defensive confrontation into a bold affirmation of India's growing strength, influence, and international standing. By refusing to be boxed in, exposing contradictions, and redirecting the narrative, he not only safeguarded his country's honor, but sent a clear message to the world. India deserves respect, refuses to be underestimated, and will assert its voice when necessary without hesitation. The surprise felt by Americans and observers across the world highlights just how impactful this approach was. It reflects a shifting global dynamic where India is no longer perceived as a supporting actor, but as an equal, confident, decisive, and influential. This moment illustrates with crystal clarity that in the modern geopolitical environment, power is not only measured by loudness or aggression, but by composure, strategic thinking, and the ability to transform pressure into opportunity. The world witnessed a leader who could stand firm without hostility, respond without insecurity, and turn a challenge into a moment of national empowerment. It showed that India has entered an era where its voice carries weight, its leadership sets tone, and its presence shapes outcomes, not by force, but by a steady blend of clarity, pride, and strategic confidence.